Dylan's hand pulled away from the guitar. He stepped back from the microphone. And he walked to the edge of the stage, because Johnny Cash was standing there, and this would be their last time. The venue was small. The Beacon Theater in New York. November 2002. One of those nights when Dylan was touring through another anonymous city, another stage, another crowd of faces he wouldn't remember. He'd been doing this for 40 years. The routine was automatic now. Walk on. Play. Leave. No explanations. No encores unless he felt like it. He was 3 songs into the set. Playing Don't Think Twice, It's Alright, in that rough, weathered voice that sounded like gravel and cigarettes and too many years on the road. The audience swayed gently. Some sang along. Most just watched, the way people watch Bob Dylan, reverently, quietly, like witnessing something historical even when it's just another Tuesday. Dylan's eyes were on his guitar strings. They usually were. He didn't look at the audience much anymore. Didn't need to. The music went where it went, and people either followed or they didn't. But then something shifted in the air. A presence. Stage left, and the wings where the crew and equipment lived in darkness. Dylan's fingers slowed on the strings. The chord progression stuttered. He looked up from the guitar, a rare thing, and his gaze moved to the left side of the stage. Standing in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the stage lights, was a tall figure in black. Thin. Too thin. A silhouette Dylan would have recognized anywhere, in any darkness, after 40 years of knowing it. Johnny Cash. Dylan's hand came off the guitar entirely. The song stopped. Not a dramatic stop, no flourish, no explanation. Just silence where music had been a moment before. The band behind him faltered, confused. The audience stirred, uncertain. Someone coughed. 300 people suddenly aware that something had broken in the performance's rhythm. Dylan said nothing. He never did. He just lowered the guitar, let it hang from its strap, and walked slowly to the edge of the stage. Dylan didn't explain himself. He never did. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 40 years before that. 1962, Greenwich Village. The folk scene was exploding and imploding simultaneously. Everyone was young and angry and convinced they were going to change the world with acoustic guitars and protest songs. Bob Dylan was 21 years old, newly arrived from Minnesota, sleeping on couches, playing any club that would let him in. Johnny Cash was already famous by then. Sun Records. Folsom Prison Blues. The Man in Black. He was country royalty while Dylan was still nobody, still Robert Zimmerman trying on the name Bob Dylan like an ill-fitting coat. They met at the Newport Folk Festival. Backstage. Brief encounter. Johnny was headlining. Dylan was on an early afternoon slot nobody cared about. "You write your own songs?" Johnny had asked, his voice that low rumble that sounded like distant thunder. "Yeah," Dylan said, guarded, expecting judgment. Country stars didn't usually respect folk singers. The genres were oil and water. "Good," Johnny said simply. "Don't stop. Don't let them tell you what to write." It was a 30-second conversation. Dylan never forgot it. Over the years, they crossed paths occasionally. Award shows. Recording sessions. Dylan would see Johnny in crowds or green rooms. They'd nod. Sometimes shake hands. Never talked much. Didn't need to. There was a recognition there. 2 men who'd built careers on refusing to be what the industry wanted them to be. In 1969, Dylan recorded "Girl from the North Country" with Johnny Cash for the album Nashville Skyline. It was one of the few times Dylan collaborated with anyone. They stood at the same microphone, their voices weaving together, Dylan's nasal rasp and Johnny's deep rumble creating something neither could have done alone. The session was quiet. Efficient. They did 3 takes. Johnny said, "That's the one." Dylan agreed. They shook hands. Went their separate ways. No drama. No conflict. Just mutual respect expressed in the only language either of them trusted, music. The decades passed. Dylan kept touring. Johnny kept recording. They existed in parallel. Two giants of American music who never competed because they were playing different games entirely. By 2002, they were both old men. Dylan was 61, his face carved into permanent lines by decades of cigarettes and road dust. Johnny was 70, dying slowly from a combination of diabetes and autonomic neuropathy that was eating him from the inside out. Johnny hadn't performed publicly in over a year. He was too weak. Too sick. Spent most of his days in his Tennessee farm, sitting in his chair, staring out at land he'd bought with royalty checks from songs he'd written half a century ago. But on November 15, 2002, Johnny Cash did something no one expected. He flew to New York. His wife June had died 5 months earlier. Johnny had been at her bedside, holding her hand when she stopped breathing. The doctor said his own death was probably months away, maybe less. His body was shutting down. His hands shook. His legs barely held him. But he got on an airplane to New York because he'd heard Bob Dylan was playing the Beacon Theater, and something in Johnny, some instinct, some knowledge that time was almost gone, made him decide this was important. He didn't tell Dylan he was coming. Didn't call ahead. Just showed up at the venue's stage door 3 hours before the show, leaning heavily on a cane, his manager supporting his other arm. The stage manager didn't recognize him at first. Johnny Cash in 2002 looked nothing like Johnny Cash in 1969. He'd lost 60 pounds. His face was gaunt. His famous black clothing hung loose on a frame that seemed to be disappearing. "I'm here to see Bob," Johnny said quietly. The stage manager's eyes widened. "Mr. Cash? Hi, we didn't know you were coming. Let me." "Don't tell him," Johnny interrupted. "Don't tell anyone. I just want to watch from the wings. That's all. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the most important part of this story is still unfolding." They set up a chair for him in the stage left wing. Hidden from the audience. Hidden from Dylan. Johnny sat there for 2 hours before the show started, waiting in the darkness, his breathing labored, his hands folded over the cane. Dylan's road manager spotted him during sound check. Walked over stunned. "Mr. Cash? Does Bob know you're here?" "No," Johnny said. "And I'd prefer to keep it that way. I don't want to distract him." "Sir, with respect, he'd want to know." "Let him play," Johnny said firmly. "Let the man work. I'll say hello after." The show started at 9. Dylan walked on stage to polite applause, the kind he always got now, respectful but not ecstatic. He plugged in his guitar, adjusted the microphone, and started playing without preamble. No introduction. No good evening. Just music. Johnny sat in his chair in the wings, 20 feet from Dylan but invisible in the darkness. He watched. He listened. His eyes never left Dylan's silhouette against the stage lights. 3 songs in, Dylan was playing "Don't Think Twice." It was a song he'd written in 1963, when he was young and angry and hadn't yet learned that most questions don't have answers. Johnny knew this song. He'd heard Dylan play it 100 times over the decades. He'd played it himself once or twice, though he'd never recorded it. And then something happened that Johnny's manager would later say seemed impossible given Johnny's condition. He stood up. Not smoothly. Not easily. His legs shook. His cane clattered against the metal stage floor. 2 crew members moved to help him, but Johnny waved them off with his free hand. He took 1 step forward. Then another. Out of the shadows. Into the spill of stage light that bled into the wings. Dylan was looking down at his guitar, lost in the chord progression, when his peripheral vision caught movement. A tall figure in black, illuminated by stage light, standing in the wings. Dylan's fingers stopped moving. The song died mid-verse. Away from the spotlight, Dylan made a choice no one expected. The audience didn't know what was happening. They saw Dylan stop playing, saw him lower his guitar and walk away from the microphone towards stage left. Some assumed it was technical difficulty. Others thought it might be part of the performance. Dylan was known for odd theatrical choices. Dylan reached the edge of the stage, looked down into the wings where Johnny Cash stood, one hand gripping his cane, the other raised in a small, uncertain wave. For 5 seconds, they just looked at each other. Two old men. Two legends. Two people who'd spent 40 years orbiting the same strange world of music and fame and trying to remain human despite it all. Dylan stepped off the stage. Not into the audience, into the wings. Down the 3 metal steps into the darkness where Johnny stood swaying slightly, his face pale, his breathing shallow. "John," Dylan said quietly. "Just the name. Nothing else." "Bob," Johnny replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hope I'm not. I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't interrupt anything," Dylan said. He looked at Johnny. Really looked at him, seeing the weight loss, the tremor in his hands, the obvious illness written across every line of his face. "Jesus, John. You shouldn't be here. You should be." "I wanted to hear you play," Johnny interrupted. "One more time. Didn't know if I'd get another chance." The words hung in the air between them. The audience was murmuring now, confused by the long pause. Dylan's band stood on stage, uncertain whether to keep playing or wait. Dylan reached out and gripped Johnny's shoulder. Not a handshake. Not a hug. Just his hand on Johnny's shoulder, solid and real. "How long you been standing there?" Dylan asked. "Since the beginning," Johnny admitted. "Didn't want to distract you." Dylan almost smiled. "Almost. You think you could make it to a chair?" "I got a chair back there." Johnny gestured weakly to the wings. "No," Dylan said. "I mean on stage." Johnny's eyes widened slightly. "Bob, I can't." "Yeah, you can," Dylan said firmly. He turned to his road manager who was hovering nearby, unsure whether to intervene. "Get a stool. Put it center stage." "Bob, the set list," the road manager started. "Doesn't matter," Dylan said. "Get the stool." What followed stayed with everyone who witnessed it, long after the sound faded. They brought a tall stool onto the stage, positioned it next to Dylan's microphone. Johnny made his way up the steps slowly. Dylan on one side, the road manager on the other, supporting him. The audience had gone completely silent now. Some recognized Johnny Cash. Most were simply confused by this frail man in black being helped onto the stage. Johnny settled onto the stool, breathing hard from the effort. Dylan handed him a bottle of water. Waited while Johnny drank. Waited while Johnny composed himself. Then Dylan walked back to his microphone, picked up his guitar, and said the only words he'd spoken to the audience all night. "Johnny Cash is here." The venue erupted. Standing ovation. Immediate. 300 people on their feet, screaming, crying, applauding this ghost of a man sitting on a stool under stage lights. Johnny raised one shaking hand in acknowledgement. Lowered it. Looked at Dylan. Dylan looked back. And in that look was a question. "What do you want to do?" Johnny's answer came in the form of a single word. "Girl." Dylan understood immediately. "Girl from the North Country." The song they'd recorded together 33 years ago. The one time their voices had woven together into something neither could create alone. Dylan started playing. Gentle. Slow. Giving Johnny time to breathe, to find his voice in a body that was failing. Johnny began singing. His voice was a shadow of what it had been, thin, wavering, breaking on certain notes. But it carried something the young voice never had, the weight of knowing this was the last time. Dylan joined him on the second verse. Their voices found each other again across 3 decades of silence. The audience sat transfixed, many crying openly, understanding they were witnessing something that would never happen again. The song lasted 4 minutes. When the final chord faded, Johnny was crying. Dylan was looking at the floor, his jaw tight. The audience stood again. Applause that felt more like prayer. Dylan helped Johnny off the stool. walked him slowly back to the wings. At the edge of the stage, Johnny stopped, turned back, looked at Dylan. "Thank you?" he said. Dylan nodded. Couldn't speak. Johnny Cash died 4 months later. February 2003. Dylan didn't attend the funeral. Couldn't. But he stopped playing Girl from the North Country in concert after that night. Never explained why. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered.